Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer and confront a massive spiritual and psychological epidemic that is quietly but entirely exhausting us all. Today, we're analyzing a highly disruptive, prophetically charged document all about what it calls the 2026 mandate. Specifically, we're unpacking the fifth major breakthrough outlined in the source material, which is the election assurance breakthrough. And listen, this isn't just some minor tweak your morning routine kind of adjustment. This is an absolute paradigm shift. It's about completely moving away from an endless, exhausting cycle of self-proving and transitioning into operating with an absolute sealed assurance. So if you've been feeling burned out by the constant demand to perform, to measure up or justify your position in your career or your ministry, well, this analysis is going to fundamentally rewire your approach to life and leadership. To get right to the heart of the matter, the document opens by directly exposing the hidden exhaustion we all feel from constantly running on the treadmill of trying to prove our worth to the world. I mean, ask yourself right now, who are you actually trying to prove yourself to? The source text argues that countless people are just running themselves ragged in the workplace, in their communities, and even in their faith. And sure, on the surface, this constant hustle looks like a really noble pursuit of excellence, but underneath that veneer, it's deeply driven by a profound, paralyzing fear of being marginalized, overlooked, or entirely left behind when the dust settles. The material diagnoses this core issue brilliantly. It calls this the orphan mentality. It defines it as a highly destructive performance-based inner system driven by an unquenchable insecurity and, honestly, a terror of being marginalized. This mindset is the absolute root of the trap. Just think about the underlying logic for a second. If your motivation for working, building, or leading is based purely on insecurity, your system is ultimately doomed to collapse because it literally has no foundation. I mean, a true heir to a royal throne doesn't run out into the busy streets to frantically prove to random strangers that they deserve to eat at the king's table, right? It's really only when you're entirely unsure of your own identity that you feel that constant, crushing need to aggressively prove it. So, this orphan mentality builds into an unsustainable weight. It forces you to frantically show the world a success resume just to feel safe. The document identifies 3 specific chains holding this toxic system together. First up is comparison. That's when you find yourself constantly staring at the resources, the platforms, or the talents of others and immediately feeling inadequate. Secondly, there's anxiety. This is living in a constant, low-grade terror of being abandoned or eliminated by a shifting economy or a volatile market. And finally, self-proving. Working ridiculous overtime, chasing superficial titles, and essentially screaming to the world that you matter. It is a completely exhausting, dead-end loop that just drains your creative and spiritual energy. To dismantle this toxic system, the source text pivots entirely away from modern self-help strategies and introduces a massive foundational theological anchor. It argues we have to shatter this lie of the orphan mentality with an absolute truth from Haggai chapter 2, verse 23. It reads, "I will make you like my signet ring, for I have chosen you." The text emphasizes that this is an undeniable, irrevocable decree. What that means is your identity is given, never earned. Notice carefully, it absolutely does not say, if you hit your key performance indicators, I'll use you. It doesn't require a spotless track record. It is an absolute, top-down declaration of being chosen that just cuts straight through all human metrics of success. To really grasp how disruptive this is, we have to look at the historical weight of what a seal actually is. Back in the ancient world, a seal, like a signet ring, wasn't some temporary Employee of the Month award. No way. It was an unshakable identity identifier. The seal is an absolute declaration of ownership and kingdom authority. When a king stamped a document or a decree with a signet ring, it instantly carried the full weight, the full protection, and the full authority of the entire kingdom right behind it. The source text argues that once you deeply realize you carry this exact seal, that frantic, desperate need to earn your place, it instantly evaporates. This brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between 2 completely different systems. In the traditional, exhausting worldly system, you work relentlessly to earn an identity. And that inevitably leaves you scrambling and fighting tooth and nail for seemingly scarce resources. But in the kingdom model, your identity is already completely secured by the seal. Because your value is locked in from the very beginning, you simply step into your designated position of authority. And from that place of profound peace, you govern resources. The entire flow of energy is reversed. You aren't working for approval anymore, you're working from a place of absolute approval. To ground this high-level theology into a gritty, actionable strategy, the text gives us a prime example. Joseph. The Joseph model of kingdom governance is an absolute masterclass in this concept. Just consider the contrast here. Joseph stood before Pharaoh, literally the most powerful man in the world, with absolute zero resources. He was a prisoner. He had a criminal record and zero social capital, yet he possessed absolute authority in that room because of the inward seal. He didn't walk into the palace with a padded resume, a venture capital firm backing him, or an anxious plea for a job. He walked in with a divine solution because he knew exactly who he belonged to. Joseph didn't complain for a single second about a lack of resources. Instead, he used his kingdom authority to provide a national-level solution to an impending crisis. The text highlights a major disruptive cognitive shift right here. Instead of looking at your bank account, your credentials, or your network and asking, "What do I have?" the sealed leader asks an entirely different question. They ask, "What can I unlock?" Joseph looked at a coming 7-year global famine and immediately unlocked a national agricultural and economic strategy that quite literally saved a civilization. He completely changed the question. Let's break down exactly how this sequence works, because the Joseph model follows 3 very distinct steps. Step 1, enter the position with the seal. You bring that quiet authority into the room first. Step 2, identify what you can unlock. Basically, what complex problem in your industry, your community, or your family are you specifically positioned to solve? And step 3, gather resources after taking authority. Now, this completely upends modern business logic, doesn't it? It disrupts traditional thinking because you step into the position of authority first, and the resources naturally gather around the solutions you provide, rather than needing the resources to validate your authority in the first place. The reason this model works so effectively is fundamentally psychological and spiritual. The core principle laid out is this: belonging produces stability, and stability produces mission. Because you're anchored by an irrevocable seal, you can stand rock solid and execute clear-headed solutions while the rest of the world panics in the face of environmental or economic shaking. When the famine hit Egypt, literally everyone else was terrified and hoarding. But Joseph was completely stable, and from that deep well of stability, his massive mission to preserve life was born and successfully executed. The source material we're analyzing ties all of this heavy framework into a very specific and urgent time frame. As we look toward the uncertainties and the coming shakings of 2026, the text argues we must lay down a radical new operational blueprint for how we engage with our lives, our ministries, and our careers. It frames 2026 not as a year to run faster in some blind panic, but as a crucial year of kingdom alignment. It marks the exact year to transition fully from an exhausting life of self-proving into a highly empowered life of running with the seal. So how do we actually apply this moving forward? Well, the document outlines a very clear, uncompromising 2026 action plan. Number 1, run in absolute assurance. Your motivation is no longer the fear of failure, but the total assurance of your calling. Number 2, refuse to compete. You have a custom-tailored kingdom track. That means there is absolutely zero need to compete for someone else's resources or to let the world's arbitrary metrics define your internal value. And number 3, kill all anxiety. Economic downturns and systemic shocks simply cannot take away an identity that was given to you by the highest possible authority. The ultimate takeaway from this breakthrough is incredibly empowering and honestly, totally disruptive to the status quo. It is time to stop handing the world your anxious, performance-driven resume, just hoping they validate you. Instead, you must step confidently into your designated sphere of governance. Seriously, stop asking the world for permission to be valuable. When you carry the seal, you aren't some orphan begging the system for scraps or a seat at the table. You are a designated leader arriving on the scene to bring heavenly order, unshakable stability, and vital solutions to earthly chaos. I want to leave you with this final challenge, straight from the heart of today's explainer. What problem will you unlock with your seal today? Will you just continue running yourself into the ground for temporary approval? Or will you actually use your unshakable kingdom identity to govern the space you've been placed in? It is time to permanently trade your anxiety for true authority. Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.